This is my colleagues in Ottawa. Donald Trump's new border czar, Tom Homan, has said there's an extreme national security vulnerability along the Canada-U.S. border, that terrorists stream from Canada to south of the border, and there needs to be tough conversations with Ottawa on this issue. Have you talked to Homan at all, or anyone else from Trump's inner circle, and do you agree with his assessment?
Well, as you know, the Prime Minister has already spoken to President-elect Trump. I look forward to speaking to Mr. Homan directly. This is not something that we've done yet. I think when it comes to our southern border and the U.S.'s northern border, you see there the alignment of interests and making sure that it is safe, that it is secure. We share information with our American partners, and we're able to apprehend folks that cross the border in a regular fashion, or in a fashion where they're not entitled to do it. And that's important, and that needs to stay the same. We have had equal challenges with respect to the flow coming from the U.S. into Canada, and have taken measures to secure it and to close some of the ways people get in here in an irregular fashion. That's going to continue. I think in all these situations, we do have to continue to work in the national interest of Canadians, which in my view is aligned with the current administration and the one that is coming in to replace it. And I expect that conversation to continue fully, and I expect there to be some tough conversations. We have had, over the last number of years, volumes of asylum seekers coming into Canada, for example, in historically high numbers. A lot of reasons that have very little to do with Canada. But we have to make sure that those flows come in a way that is regular. There is a way to come to Canada. There's a way not to come to Canada, and continue to make those measures regardless of what the administration to the south is and on any particular set of 4 years. So that'll continue, and I actually look forward to those conversations.
Okay, and the follow-up is, if the number of clandestine migrants streaming into Canada increases exponentially because of a Trump clampdown, can the U.S. still be considered a safe third country?
And we expect the U.S. to abide by the safe third country agreement that we have. That is an agreement that has allowed us to have a managed flow of migrants in the border that is so important to our economic relationship, the flow of goods, the flow of individuals. And we've proven throughout the last decade that we're able to manage it responsibly. Are there changes to be made at any particular point in time when we see behaviors changing, when we see our security agencies advising us to adopt a different posture? I think absolutely. Those are conversations that won't be had in public. They're ones that we'll work with the Americans to make sure that we are working in both our national interests.
Okay, on next to Bobo. No? Okay, go next to CTV.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. We go next to Ami. Yeah.
Hi, Minister.
How are you?
Welcome to Vancouver. My name is Rhea Santos from Omni Television. For the longest time, the temporary foreign worker program has been a source of cheaper labor for many employers. That businesses are warning on the consequences of Ottawa's tougher policies to hire a TFW. Now, Minister, if both the temporary foreign workers and employers are not happy, why does Canada still keep the temporary foreign worker program?
You're talking about a low-wage stream that is only a very small portion of temporary residents in Canada. And maybe it is the case that employers need to pay their employees more, and we need to address what is in this area sometimes a very disproportionate relationship between employers and employees. I'm not going to say that every employer mistreats their employee. Far from that. I think if there's any indication from the screenings that we do is that the vast majority of employers are responsible. But there are challenges in the system. There are exploitative relationships that exist, and we need to crack down on them. That includes a proper wage. Clearly, in some of the low-wage categories, whether it's people working in farms, whether it's people working in food processing, we've seen an exponential rise in those categories in the last few years, and those need to be addressed, I think, in the proper fashion, reducing the volume, but also making sure that we are not cutting off an area of industry in agriculture that that in this era of food inflation is very important to the food sovereignty of Canada. So the answers aren't simple. It starts with making sure that everyone is treated with dignity as they work in Canada, regardless of whether they are temporary or a Canadian citizen. But it goes through making sure that the federal government is cracking down on bad behavior, making sure that employees in some circumstances may have more open permits than perhaps the conditions that they face currently, whether it's regional permits or sectoral permits. It's something we're looking at as we continue to reform the system. It's clear that the age of unlimited supply of cheap foreign labor is over, and I think that is a good thing, but it isn't, these are not sort of binary discussions and decision points. There's some nuance within them, and it comes with a package of reforms that are important, and we'll continue to work, consult with industries, consult with employees, consult with organizations that have these issues near and dear to their heart to make sure that we get the policy package right, and that includes, importantly, the province of BC.
And as mentioned a while ago, mass deportation is expected to happen in the U.S. as Trump goes into power. What would be Canada's plan for those people who have fallen out of status because of changing immigration policies? Are we going to see an increase in deportations in Canada as well? Are they going to be part of the immigration levels plan of Canada for 2025 to 2027?
You know, I think if you've followed some of the announcements that we've had on regularization, that a large-scale regularization plan is off the table in the runway we have up till the next election. It doesn't mean that in some areas, whether it's areas where we need key employees, that there isn't the possibility of sort of small-scale regularization. That is something that we will work on. In the current context of the new U.S. administration, I'm not going to speculate about that. The reality is that Canada needs an asylum system that is fair, that is firm, and that isn't cruel. But part of that means people getting the due process that they have and are entitled to when they are on Canadian soil. That also includes the fact that when they fail, they need to leave the country, and that sometimes also includes deportations. And it's part of making sure that we have a credible immigration system that we can all be proud of. Going back to one of the comments that your colleague made about the Safe Third Country Agreement, the reason that exists is that the U.S. is deemed to be a safe country for people to make their initial asylum claim. So too with Canada, it's a two-way street. So if people cross the border, they are returned if they've made their claim in the other country. That is a managed process that I think is very important as part of a North American perimeter. So we expect that agreement to continue to be fully enforced and for Canadian authorities to enforce the obligations under the Safe Third Country Agreement, just as much as we expect the U.S. authorities to do the same on their side of the border.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we'll go to Cecilia next.
Hi, Minister. In the forum, you saw a lot of anonymous questions regarding, the future of.
I think it was part of the forum. I think it was just me making jokes, but they would have put their names to it.
Unanswered questions, but I was hoping, it is a $30 billion industry, and a lot of the institutions that rely heavily on international students, they're starting to see the impacts and having to cut back, laying off their professors and cutting down programs. How do you ensure that the few international students we are still admitting are getting that quality of education that we have before?
Those are two separate but related questions. On the first one, yes, $30 billion is what is often cited. I've characterized that in the past, I think fairly, as short-term gain with a lot of long-term pain people haven't thought through. My question is, who takes care of those kids? I say kids in a respectful fashion because they're a young cohort of the population, very bright, looking to come to Canada to get one of the top educations in the world. And then after 3 years, if they're all going into one sector of the industry, having paid out $100,000 to go and work in the restoration business, there are better ways, if there are labor shortages in that area, to get people in the country without asking them to spend $100,000. I think you'll agree with me on that. So who did what with the money? What purpose was that used for the institutions that have bolstered or filled their coffers on the backs of international students? It's not an equal discussion. There are some institutions that have been very responsible. There are some that have been irresponsible entirely and have taken people for a ride as part of a racket. And there's some people that are in between. And I think reducing the volume, making sure that the quality proposition in this international visa program is one that we can be proud of, is the first step. That way, we ensure that those people that are bringing institutions, colleges, some of them that are the pride of our nation, are ones that need to accompany these students better in their educational experience, so that we don't have tens of thousands claiming asylum after the first year or after the 3-year period because they feel they can't have any other prospect in Canada. That was not the nature of the program that we put into place in the first place. So there's some responsibility here to go around. And I think what we're seeing is institutions adapting, and I acknowledge that this year and the next year will be one of turbulence. But bringing the numbers down, I think, is very important to making sure that we aren't simply chasing short-term gain for a lot of long-term pain. Because my question to those institutions is at what point did you realize you were taking part in a racket? And that's not a question that I've heard the answers to, but it is part of a process of acknowledging that there's some responsibility here, and that there's some responsibility to educate these young, bright minds that are essential to making the workforce younger, which is a huge generational challenge of all of us if we want, as we age into our later years, to be taken care of as part of a tax base, or people that are able to generate revenue for Canada and make Canada even better than it is today. So this is a much broader conversation than simply an immigration challenge, but I think by answering that first question, it allows me to answer your second question, which is we need to take care of these people when they come in here, or so that at least they have the sense of what they are getting into when they come to Canada. And that hasn't always been the case. This is not a backdoor opportunity to immigrate to Canada. It is a visa program that aims international excellence. And in that case, we owe it to ourselves to look at the quality proposition that's being offered, and right now it isn't where I think it should be. And I think most institutions would agree with me. That includes BC, but it includes every other province that has had international students going to it.
Just to follow up, what is the end goal measure of success for your plans? Is it just to bring that population down by 0.2 after 2025, 2026? Is it, like you said, rent going down, GDP going up? How do you measure the success of your policies?
All the impacts on affordability, which are significant, are very much parallel discussions that have their important impacts that we've seen of the volume coming in, but they aren't and shouldn't be my primary focus as the Minister of Immigration and Refugees. I need to have a visa program that makes sense. As I mentioned in the meeting today, I think everyone could agree that if this was a discussion about a 3-year study visa with nothing else associated to it, come here, go home, I wouldn't be having this conference today. We'd have fewer numbers, and we'd have an expectation from people coming to this country that that's what they were there to do. In this day and age, obviously, people need the opportunity to work. If there's some bright minds, we would be stupid not to keep them. But it can't be in the volumes that we have seen and the impacts that has had. My first and most important duty is to make sure that this is a visa program that has integrity, that we can be proud of, and that really fosters international excellence. And that's the measure of success, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, Thomas from Bloomberg. Just on the matter of deportations, I think there's some skepticism.
Mutter or matter?
Matter. Maybe I muttered. There's some skepticism about the number of the population decrease that is projected, that temporary foreign workers, temporary residents may not actually leave at the expiration of their permits. And so, are those doubters wrong, and does Canada need to ramp up certain enforcement capabilities that it hasn't used so much in the past to be able to hit those targets?
I think we always have to look at what measures that Canada needs to take to ramp up enforcement. People that face expiring visas in various categories have a choice, and it is often a choice that they exercise, which is to leave. They can stay or they can leave. If they stay, they're in an irregular position and they are breaking the law. That's got to be quite clear. It is also clear that when you have a temporary program, it has to mean something. It means that people eventually may have to leave or are expected to leave. That said, and I've been clear in the last levels announcement that I made a little over a week ago, that having people here temporarily doesn't mean you're fully excluded from becoming a permanent resident. And I think indeed some of that cohort, as you mentioned, are fully expecting to become permanent residents. That's why I've said, and this is a position of some advantage, is that we have the ability to draw on a domestic labor pool in the quality and quantity that we need to transition to permanent residency. And that is why the last levels plan focuses heavily on making sure that a good chunk of the permanent residency draws come not from abroad, but from the domestic labor pool that here exists. That is an increasing precarious position, but they will have a choice, and we expect that choice with respect to the ending of their visas to be respected. In the context of enforcement generally, broadly speaking, we absolutely need to look at the enforcement mechanisms that we employ to make sure that people that don't want to leave after due process actually do leave. And simply as if you were to look at the numbers of people that we have had to remove from the country during this year and last, they are at record highs. So enforcement is happening, but it isn't something that we do lightly.
Does that require extra resources? Are you looking at funding, more?
That's the way it works.
And,
That's the way it works.
Have you scoped that out? How much?
I mean, that's if you need more resources, and I'm not going to share publicly the plans that we have on enforcement, but more enforcement means more resources, yeah.
Thank you. That concludes today's
I'll ask a question if Global doesn't ask first. You've suggested that some of what Donald Trump has said on migrants might be hyperbole. What makes you believe that?
Look, I think that anytime we have looked at any election cycle to the south, it doesn't take much to come to that conclusion. I think we have to take the statements seriously at the same time and prepare for it. And I think if we've demonstrated anything to anyone as a country, particularly with the prior administration under President Trump, is that we are able to work together in very difficult circumstances, including in securing the northern border to the U.S., southern to us, in the context of something equally difficult, which is a global pandemic. So I'll say this again because it's true, but it is in the national interest of both countries to make sure that we have managed flows of migration and flow of goods across that border. And it's something that we have to continuously strive to make and get right.
Minister, do you want to repeat that question, please?
The question or the answer? Je pense que je vais le dire, je ne vais pas le traduire 100% comme je l'ai dit en anglais, mais je pense que c'est dans l'intérêt national des deux pays, les États-Unis et le Canada, de s'assurer que la frontière en est une qui gère bien les flux commerciaux, les flux de migration. Et on se doit évidemment de s'ajuster quand on voit quelque chose qui va moins bien. Et ce, dans le contexte d'administration avec lesquelles on n'a pas nécessairement les mêmes principes, les mêmes idéologies. Mais c'est la nature d'une relation de travail avec les États-Unis. On n'est pas nécessairement toujours sur la même longueur d'onde, mais en ce qui a trait à l'intérêt national, d'avoir une frontière nordique, frontière du Sud, dans le cas du Canada, c'est de s'assurer que c'est une frontière qui est bien gérée, qui contrôle très bien ses flux commerciaux, les flux de migrants, et que s'il y a des ajustements à faire, ça se fait dans tout le respect de la négociation et de la discussion avec les États-Unis. L'entente sur les tiers pays sûrs est une entente qui est importante et qui gère bien les flux de gens qui chercheraient peut-être à changer de pays quand ils ont déjà fait une demande d'asile dans un pays qui est jugé sûr. Et c'est une entente qu'on s'attend à ce que les États-Unis respectent. On va le respecter aussi. Merci.